Okay. All right.
Let's see who's coming on.
We are live, so people are jumping on in. Hey, Doug, Karen, Lee, Mike, Sabina, Trevor, Mark. Lots. We're expecting a good turnout again today. So 100 people, over 100 people actually registered, so that is good. And so for those of you jumping on, my name's Hamish Conway, and very soon Andy Mitchell will take over the main hosting refereeing, and we'll introduce everyone here. If you haven't yet been on one of these calls, thank you for jumping on to the export recovery panel. And as you jump on, what would be good is to start getting used to some of the controls if you haven't been on Zoom. So there's the chat, and then there's the Q&A piece. So if you could just put into the chat, just saying hello, just say hi, I can see you, I can hear you.
I know you're there.
So that we know we're there.
Hi, Harrison, Maria, everyone's here.
Everyone's here, good stuff.
That's all right. And
then, so I'd also just bring your attention, just while waiting on a few others to come on as well. So we've got the chat there, which many of you are doing now, which is fantastic. So most people can see that. You've got two options there. One is going to all panelists, or you can do it to everyone. So just look at the to button down there. But then if you've got a specific question as we go through, if you could use the Q&A, and because we won't lose your question in the feed, it will go into a separate box that we can see, so we can make sure at the end we will get to your questions, or as many of those questions as possible. So have a look down the bottom there to see that Q&A, and that will be fantastic. So just to kick things off, we're going to do a poll, and again, as people are coming on to the call. So this first poll relates to the topic, which is really around, getting moving or getting your inventory moving. And how can you do that? In the last couple of weeks, we've talked about logistics and cash flow and getting certainty in the business. But this week, we want to look at around inventory. And so I'm just going to launch this poll here for people to vote on. Now, tell me, can you see it?
Yes, we can, Hamish.
You can? Fantastic. So this is really, how urgent is it for you to be moving your inventory? Is it within 1 month, I have to move inventory right now? Or within 2 months, I've a bit of time to move, but the other bit I can't see yet. but anyway, you'll get, so 2 months or 3 to 4 months, I have time to make some channel or market changes, or my current markets and channels are working okay. So it'd be interesting to see where people are at around that urgency of having to move inventory. So,
and if anybody else has joined us in the last minute, just say hello in the chat. It's great to see you out there, and great to see some friendly faces coming back again. There's Fiona and Bruce and Mike and Donna. It's cool. So if you just jumped on, then again, just drop a note out there just to say kia ora. And there's Paul. Proving that every day.
Over to you, Andy. So how many we've got? Half people have voted. So if you're just jumping on, vote away, and we'll give that another 30 seconds.
Give it another 30 seconds, and then we'll get stuck in, get everybody comfortable at home.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay. So Andy, do you want to?
All right. Shall I kick things off?
Get things underway, and then we'll come back and look at the results.
Well, let's kick things off in the way we have done for the last 4 weeks, and just saying a very good morning to everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for what is our fourth Survive to Thrive webinar. If you haven't been here before, it's very simple. It's a series of weekly webinars by New Zealand's exporters for New Zealand's exporters, as together we kind of navigate the current situation with COVID, and hopefully plot a path back to stability and success for ourselves and for our businesses, for our communities, and of course for our country. As per ever, we've gathered a series of experts today on this webinar to be able to share what's going through their minds, topical about what's happening in the world right here and right now. Because in this series, we're trying to take the things which you're grappling with and sharing them in a forum here to remind you that the export community is fundamentally here to help each other. If we all stand together and help each other, we're going to get together further, faster, and stronger out of this. As Hamish has said, the topic today is what to do with inventory. In the past week, we've had lots of conversations with people who are wondering what to do, whether to stay on track with their existing strategies or whether to take some tactic and actually have to move to try to liquidate some of the inventory that's sitting in their warehouses. And then that deciding whether to jump or when to jump is incredibly nuanced and incredibly difficult. So we're going to grapple with that task. But first of all, before we do that and before we introduce the panelists, let's just get a feeling for how pressing this is with you. Hamish, can you bring up that poll, mate, and we'll take a little look.
Yeah, here we go. So can you see, is that coming up there for people?
It's coming up there.
Great.
Yeah.
So a bit of an even spread. It's 25% within a month.
Yeah.
31% 2 and 33% in 3 to 4 months. So there's obviously some urgency there to get inventory moving.
And ultimately, about 89% of you there are thinking about that inventory. So this is top of mind. So in which case you're in the right webinar on the right day. So congratulations. So let's move on to our panelists and find out who we've got here. I'm first of all going to go to Alistair. And welcome back. Alistair was with us to talk about supply chains from a couple of weeks ago. And after much popular demand, he's back. Alistair, you yourself. Tell us why you're so popular and what you're doing here today.
Yep, thank you. So I work at New Zealand Post. I'm the general manager for strategic relationships. So my sole focus at the moment is just making sure that we can build our line haul and supply lines in and out of New Zealand for air freight predominantly, but also ocean freight. So I look forward to joining in.
Thank you, Alistair. That's magic. Our second guest today is Jack Stenhouse. We're very lucky to have Jack, because he's just freshened back from South Korea and literally out of deep quarantine in the last few days. Welcome, Jack. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Thank you. I'm very happy to have graduated from a quarantine hotel to a small Airbnb, so feeling much more comfortable about life. I lived and worked in Korea for just over 11 and a half years, 4 or so years working with New Zealand exporters, doing in-market representation in Seoul. And then the last 5 years for NZTE, a couple of years as a business development manager, and then most recently as the trade commissioner. So just freshly returned, and I'm looking forward to a new life here in Auckland.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Jack. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to move to Paul Pritchard. Paul, welcome. Kia ora. Paul, could you introduce yourself, please, to the audience?
Happy to. So I'm Paul Pritchard. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Overdose. Overdose is a global e-commerce agency, and we operate in multiple markets, helping brands run direct-to-consumer and B2B in market and for export as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Paul. Thanks for joining us, mate. To the gentleman with the beard, Christopher Boyes, who are you? Why are you here?
Andy, thank you very much. Christopher Boyes, founder of Catapult. Our purpose is to help companies as a bolt-on around capability and capacity in the export space. The biggest challenge of a lot of exporters is you're stuck in BAU. And BAU can get very busy, and if you want to grow and open new markets, you need some capability and capacity, and that's what our core part of our business is. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Chris. And I think it's probably time that we introduce ourselves again, Hamish, just in case anyone's forgotten who we are. Hamish Conway, who are you?
Good. So Hamish Conway, owner of Cell Global, and we help New Zealand brands and also Australian brands launch and succeed on the Amazon platforms in the USA, UK, Europe, and Australia. So that's what I do. Yeah.
And finally, I'm Andy Mitchell, and I am a strategist at Catapult. So I spend a lot of time grappling with problems of export, but my job here today is to be your match official and to keep the conversation going. I just want to put a big shout out, first of all, to Bo, who is telling Paul that he likes your likes the artwork behind you, mate. So at a time like lockdown, any compliment's a good compliment. So thank you, Bo. Like you're making. Oh no, we've there's now, if anybody wants to comment on Jack's artwork, any art experts out there, let's get that into feed as well. But back to the topic of today. It's been a long time in this one chair, 4 weeks in this chair. I honestly haven't moved from my office downstairs in West Auckland. I want to start first with you, Alistair, please, because there was some announcements from the Prime Minister yesterday alluding to a change in situation, maybe next week, maybe not. You've got your finger on the pulse of all things logistics from NZ Post point of view. Can you just give us your viewpoints on what to expect in the coming week?
Yeah, we're gearing up for next Thursday. I'd assume that we'll be going to alert level 3. That means all online businesses and many businesses can open up again. So, at the moment, 2 weeks ago, New Zealand Post, a bit like other competitors, were trading at about 50 or 60% capacity. Recently, we've been trading up to 90% capacity, meaning that business has been starting to pick up. But what's going to happen is, our belief is next week it's really going to start pumping out, and a lot of clients are going to come on board. And so, yeah, there'll be a big influx of not just small parcel, but every type of freight is really going to kick off towards the end of next week.
All right, a big change on top of that. Thank you. Is there, just with that coming in mind, is there anything that we should be doing, Alistair, right now, to be able to ready ourselves for that, and with our, particularly with our relationship with our logistics partner?
Yeah, absolutely. So, really important that you get in touch with your logistics provider now. Let them know that if you're planning to be back online, let them know what your expectation is, what they're expecting to pick up. Because come Thursday, you can imagine, there's going to be some bottlenecks, right? So there'll be lots of additional pickups ready for collection, and I think operationally most of the providers will be fine once I've made the pickups, but make sure you're not forgotten. Make sure that you're talking to your account manager so that you're ready to go 9 a.m. Thursday morning.
All right, so as per ever, the shout out there is to be prepared. Let's get ourselves on the front foot. Thank you, Alistair, for that. Let's jump into the topic properly. We've been hearing about people being worried about their inventory, and that's the poll this morning has supported that. What else have we heard out there? Paul, from your perspective, is this a problem which is widespread from your community?
I think if you're looking at merchants who operate in the New Zealand market and who have overseas markets like Australia and maybe up into Asia and further afield, I guess the challenge you face is twofold. One is you've got this great opportunity coming next week, hopefully when you can start to trade online. And that's going to be a huge hustle to kind of get yourself set up. And as Alistair said, planning for your logistics part of your business is really key to that. But you also have this crazy opportunity now where the world's changed. And, a lot of the businesses that we work with are starting to consider how they're going to operate in this new world, right? And so you've got these two situations where you're challenged with speed and pace in order to be ready for what may happen next week. And then you've got this long-term view of kind of what does my business look like further afield, right? What are the new opportunities that are presenting themselves? How do I pivot? Or in some cases, I've had a client say pirouette. And so you're in this really interesting space. And I think, the end of this week and then the beginning of next week are going to be exciting and challenging times for most merchants. So, look for your partners to start to be there to support you and to work at the pace that you need to work as well. I think that's kind of the key thing.
Exactly. Yeah. This is ultimately a critical time. Jack, you've got a very unique position, having just come back from South Korea. Is the inventory problem is the problem more piled here inside New Zealand, or is stock actually flowing through to retailers once you're in market?
Look, in Korea, as you'd expect with the rest of the world, it's not perfect, but it is relatively smooth. There are certain areas that have taken a hit, but if we look at the overall level of consumer demand in the supply chain, it's functioning reasonably well. Most consumer demand is holding up quite well. What we are seeing is an absolutely dramatic shift to online channels. And I guess overall trends that we were expecting to develop within 2 or 3 years, it's looking like those will be developed quite significantly, and perhaps 6 months to 12 years we'll see a complete 12 months we'll see a complete landscape shift. So very interesting things happening at the moment.
So that dramatic shift we're talking about towards online, Christopher, from your perspective there, are we seeing that with the export community here? Are people starting to make decisions to move from more traditional channels into direct selling?
Look, I think there's definitely some optimism out in the market at the moment. Talking to a lot of the businesses in the market at the moment, and also NZT and government, there's this optimism in the market that we should be looking at new opportunities in the market. With regards to direct selling, look, I think there's some companies at the moment that are considering it. And back to Paul, there's some very good mechanisms out there of how you can get direct to your consumer in the New Zealand market. But in the international space, that does take time. And I think, if looking back at that poll, if we're thinking about, and 33% are thinking in 3 to 4 months' time, you need to be acting now, right? You need to be finding some partners or bolt-on capability to be able to act now, because it takes time.
So I feel the pressure to not lag and be in the front foot and to act now. But how do we know that now is the right time to pivot or to pirouette, as Paul's customer said, which is, that might be just doing multiple pivots. But how do we know it's actually the right time to make that change? Hamish, from an Amazon channel point of view, what are you seeing and what's your perspective on that? Maybe with your mute off.
Brilliant. Anyway, so look, what we're seeing is generally marketplaces like an Amazon, eBay, Catch, for example. That's where a lot of consumers are looking to begin their buying journey online. So that's a really important point to note. And I mean, last year it was like 52% in Australia, at least, and it's climbing. But if you look at some markets like the USA, over half of all online sales are made on the Amazon platform. And there's just, Amazon is so entrenched in the USA and a lot of UK and Europe that's just where consumers have flooded to. And they've had such a huge surge in demand with brick and mortar opportunities closing down. They're hiring 100,000 extra people to keep up with the demand. So there's certainly, that is a channel, and we're seeing with our customers, in some cases, getting 5 times revenue growth in that market as well, particularly in like food and beverage sort of space. But actually, across the board, everyone is rising. But that's those that are there now. I mean, in terms of getting going into that marketplace, I mean, you're exporting still, so you've still got to comply to any regulatory requirements for that country. For example, FDA, if you've got food or health related products. So there are those compliance aspects to realize that you've still got to do. So it is more of a 3-month game plan to be up and running in those markets. So which fits those people looking at that 3 to 4 months ongoing. Australia, you can do it a bit quicker. But that is what we're seeing. We'll talk more about it in terms of how it ties in with your own e-commerce as well a bit later.
So much of the traffic that came into us since last week has been talking about tactical selling and people wondering whether we should be approaching it the same way if it's B2B versus B2C. Like jumping into a global platform like Amazon might seem right if you're a B2C player, but maybe not for B2B. Jack, what's your perspective there? Should we be approaching it differently if we're in 2 different customer groups?
With relation to the market in Korea, B2B is really all about your relationships, particularly with your manufacturers. And at this point in time, I think the best strategy is always just a proactive communication strategy. Obviously, you can't get into market, but as detailed and frequent communications as you can in order to maintain and build your relationships with your in-market partners. That would be the most proactive step you'd have to take, I think, moving forward.
Yeah, and what about your perspective, Christopher? I mean, is this tactical selling actually the route to a new export market, or is this just a short-term tactical play if we decide to jump online?
Oh, look, I think first and foremost, we need to go back to what is your current strategy, and where we've been developing some products over the last couple of weeks at Catapult around triage. How do you triage your current channels and partners in the market to go deep and work with them to assess if those markets are still going to be on, or you're going to be getting revenue from those markets, and if they're going to be performing for you. Once you've done that step and you can actually understand through your current partners what the landscape is and what the opportunity could be, then we can look at tactical selling. But tactical selling, the same process. It's a very similar process to be around focus, target, research who the B2B players are that you should be targeting in export markets. So I don't think it's yes or no. I think it's about an order.
And likewise here, it's like, well, from your perspective, Paul, how do you deal separately for finding platforms for B2B versus B2C? Is it the same set of platforms, or is it a whole different consideration set?
I'd say before we kind of entered into this pandemic environment, we saw a lot of trend for B2B to move into a D2C mentality, right? So this heavy mix of consumer expectation being pulled back into this business to business environment where the experience needed to change, where the pace of transaction needed to be updated, where, you know, where a traditional kind of wholesaler would run a price book and you know their customers personally. That was shifting really, really rapidly. I think now what we're seeing is the blending together of those types of experiences. And so if you're a wholesaler wanting to open up new markets and attract new customers, you know, it's an online world now, right? People are moving into the space rapidly. Consumer behavior will change, and so will business behavior. And so these things are blending. I guess, you know, the simple answer is if it wasn't part of your strategy before, it has to be part of your strategy now, regardless of direct to consumer or B2B.
So thanks. So in building this new strategy, then what are the steps to try to understand which platform to go to first? It's like as soon as you dig into the complexity, it's easy to get lost quite quickly. Hamish, from your perspective, process-wise, how do you select the right platform right at the very start so you know where to focus?
Well, it's going to come down to timing as well, like the urgency factor that you've got. As I was saying with Amazon, if you're looking at the US, UK, you're really looking at a 3 to 4 month window, and then you've still got to build up your effectively credibility on that channel. So it makes perfect sense, medium, long term, that's where you want to be. If you've got to move inventory quickly, well, then you've got to look at some alternate solutions. I know Paul, before the call, was talking about you know, testing in new markets relatively quickly, more from your own e-commerce point of view rather than a marketplace. So that's something to consider as well. And it's also, this is like if it's B2C, this makes sense, of course. So that's, but you've got to make sure it is the right thing for your brand as well. Because, you know, Amazon, which I know is what we specialize in, that's not for everyone. You've got to make sure that from a money point of view it works, a compliance point of view it works, and there's not going to be any challenges come up. So it's not for everyone, but it is really, you've got to kind of, as Chris was saying, you've got to slow down to speed up in terms of you do actually need to evaluate and kind of quickly, you know, does this make sense? And then we can go in the appropriate direction. Yeah. But it is like your Amazon and your own e-commerce working together, or a marketplace and your own e-commerce working together is what you want to be creating.
Finding that direction is critical. Paul, have you got some tips on that whole platform selection piece? Where do you start the search to find out what's right, and how do you go about it?
I think you know, there's so many platforms out there, particularly if you wanted to stand up a e-commerce platform immediately. You know, like the landscape looks pretty crowded, but the reality is you can get a site up on your own in a week, you know, if you need to, and if you've got a small inventory. I guess the key thing for us when we look at what platforms are right, you know, whether you're talking e-com tool sets like Magento or Shopify or BigCommerce or the like, it's really fit for business, right? There's price, there's capability sets, there's, you know, is the platform continually available as well for markets? And if you're bringing on new markets, is it easier to set up a new currency, new language, rapidly, or do you have to kind of rethink the whole architecture again? But I think, you know, Hamish was talking about kind of suitability for the business and, you know, going slow in order to go fast. We're now facing an opportunity set for businesses to start to rethink the way that they trade through multiple avenues, right? You know, you look at locally places like TradeMe, right? Standing up a store on TradeMe is actually relatively quick, and if you're a small business and you want to get products in front of people, you know, that's a great search engine to be a part of, alongside your own kind of e-store as well. If you want to launch into new markets like the US, into Europe, into Asia, you know, you need to talk to people who have local experience, you know, on the ground, practical experience to get through some of those regulatory, plus some of those consumer behavior hurdles as well that you see.
Now this feels very much like normal exporting, partner-led exporting, because it's the same market, same conditions, same legislation. Jack, from your experience in market here, it's like who's on the ground in markets to help us with that rapid validation of of issues which you might face and to help with partner selection?
Yeah, in terms of partner selection, every market's very different, and Korea is an interesting one in that it's an extremely connected country, and there's a very high percentage of product that's sold online, 25 to 30% of overall retail before we hit this crisis. And yet, the number of platforms that are importing directly is very low. They're dabbling. There's also a low number of platforms, of these major platforms, that have warehousing and logistics capabilities. So it's still more of a traditional export market in the fact that the majority of online product is still sold through an in-market partner. We're expecting that will change over the next couple of years. But at this stage, it's still very much isolate the best partner that's working with the right platforms and has the best capability for marketing and selling online, and work with them to understand what are the regulations to get into market and make your strategy move forward.
Thank you. I think you've raised an amazing point here that it's all very well selecting a platform, but unless you can move products into the market legally, then nothing is going to happen. Alistair, from a logistics partner point of view, how can people like New Zealand Posts, when markets are opening and becoming more accessible at a ridiculous pace every day, how can a partner like New Zealand Post or other logistics partners help us to make a decision on whether it's actually viable to be looking at a platform in a particular market right now?
Sure. So there's two parts to it. Is how's your product going to get into the market? Are you going to air freight it in on pallets? Are you going to ocean freight it in? As we all know, air freight outbound from Oceania now is doubled, tripled, quadrupled in price. So that would become quite expensive. So you've just got to work out now if it's economically viable if your product's coming out of New Zealand. Out of China, it's not too bad. There's still a lot of air freight volume, capacity, but it is still more expensive. If you're shipping by ocean, you're still okay. But and in fact, ocean prices have come down a little bit. But the issue is now, for the first time, we're seeing offloads on ocean, because now the ships are full, because everyone's moving away from air and now moving into ocean. So just be aware of that. And then just the final point there is, if you are, and that's more B2B transactions, getting your product into market. But if you're say shipping from New Zealand or Australia, B2C, obviously there's going to be a lot of delays. You just need to make sure to tell your customers to expect, whatever it might be, talk with your provider, not just New Zealand Post, even DHL, or I shouldn't name companies, but every company will face delays outbound now. But my final point to that, just an idea, was look at what technology, if you are doing B2C offshore, what technology is there for your consignees or for your receivers to be able to manipulate the shipment as it gets into the country, change address or defer delivery, make sure that they've got access to tracking, make sure that you're proactively telling them that your shipment will be a week late if it is going to be, and just be very upfront on your website to say, do expect a 1 week delay into whichever market. But so just a few tidbits there, because
I think it's a great reminder that regardless of whether you're selling to your pre-COVID strategy or whether you're reacting to be able to move consignments right now, the same rules exist. Make sure that you've got some flexibility built into that supply chain, and make sure that you're managing expectations throughout. I just want to bounce over to you, Christopher. You spend much of your time overseas helping companies to select partners. And partners at a time like this are so much closer to a market and the reality of the pace of change than anybody else. How would you approach working with your existing partners to help you find tactical routes to try to move inventory in the short term? It's quite a delicate political thing to do with a partner who you might be changing terms on. What's the best way to approach that very, very human challenge?
Look, I think the first point is get on the telephone. Actually be communicating with our partners in those markets. And it astounds me, email is such a bad way of communication. You can't sense what's going on in the market, and it's actually about picking up the telephone, having a conversation, showing some empathy, understanding how the family is, understanding how their business is it surviving or falling over. You can't have that conversation on email. Having that empathetic conversation will allow you to understand their current situation. After 2 or 3 conversations, as we've been just having with other clients into Germany and Italy at the moment, you start understanding, or you can evolve that conversation as to, is there other opportunity in the market? I.e., in the supply side, is one of your direct competitors pulled out? Can you work with them to incentivize them, give them more margin to own that category? You know, we do have some mechanisms we can play with our partners in market, but it's about, especially if you've got inventory to move, we should be thinking about, okay, instead of dumping it in a market, how do we work with our partners to incentivize them, to incentivize the retailer to move those goods through for you? It's probably our position on it at the moment.
So when we're kind of beyond this first stage then, Chris, thank you for that. And we're thinking about assessing whether it's actually viable, assessing the viability of the logistics, the viability of the platform to connect to the right markets. How do we approach testing? In tactical selling here, moving online, should we be putting some regime or some expectations about how long we test the market for before, test the platform for, sorry, before we decide it's working or not? First to you, Paul, on what's your perspective on that?
In terms of new market testing, I think there's really fast and inexpensive ways of testing the validity of putting your brand and product into that market. We run a lot of these kind of short turnaround survey things. In fact, we've done some work with NZTE on how to acquire customers to talk to research the product against. Now, this stuff is all online, but what it does is it gives you an immediate validation of whether or not it's worthwhile digging in, right? And I think, when we talk about speed and the ability to kind of move your business into different directions, that type of approach is a really strong one, because what it does is it goes, is there demand for my product in market? Do I have a place where it will resonate? And is there a customer base that may or may not be ready to buy the product? The next point, I think, and Christopher, you really touched on that, the reseller opportunity is going to change, right? Where you had to run through really traditional routes of negotiating terms and margin controls and volume of shipping of products into, marketplaces like, say, Nordstrom in the US. That whole shift into this online space is going to be about demand, right? And about the ability to get product in front of customers and then worry about the shipping and logistics piece afterwards. So I think, having those conversations, and you bang on, Christopher, right? Like sending emails and expecting responses at this stage is just, expect crickets. I'd say pick up the phone, organize calls. Like we've found LinkedIn has been a really powerful tool to connect with people and to start a conversation. You need to be out there starting to look at the world in a different lens and see who you can reach out to find allies that can help you, I guess, understand the spaces that you can play in as well.
So thanks, Paul. So when you're understanding this world, should we be like selecting a single platform for tactical selling and just putting all our eggs in one basket, or should we be testing platform against platform in the markets? Hamish, what's your feeling on that?
Well, focus is important at times like this, and I think Paul saying, this is really a demand-led thing. Like who's got money that you can sell to, whether it's B2B or B2C. Where is that demand actually going to be? Is what I think. So, and I've got the rest of the question anyway.
What are your thoughts on that? Christopher, you're down in the hole.
Sorry, ask the question again.
We're all extra smooth at the present moment. Should we be testing platform versus platform, or should we be putting our form with this is tactical selling? Should we accept that it's a one shot that we've got to try to move some inventory?
Yeah, look, I'd probably give a China example here. There's a lot of companies in New Zealand over the last 2 or 3 years that have been taken into Alibaba, and they've been led there by the big shiny beast, and some very good business development staff in New Zealand. And that hasn't translated necessarily to revenue for them. And I think the underlying answer here is to go back to, okay, in China, it's an enormous market. There are multiple platforms and channels. Which are the ones there that are going to be right to find your customer? Right? There's some very premium channels in China that we could be selling online. But again, it's about assessing those markets, those opportunities, and building a criteria of what's right for your business. Because if we don't do that, you'll end up spending 40 or 60 or 100 grand getting a store on Alibaba, and you won't get any revenue. Right?
Yeah.
So tip it down the toilet.
A lot of this, it does come down to basic principles of being very clear. We just got a message in from John from the audience there, just saying that it all comes down to understanding your strategies and to how to achieve your outcomes and objectives. And it's a really good reminder. It's like, even though you're selling tactically here to try to move some inventory, you still have to be going back to your value proposition to connect the right product to the right person. We might just be doing it in a way that's more short-termist. Just before we move towards some questions, I'm just really open to the panel's their panel's view on whether tactical selling like this is something which you do once and then shut down again, or whether this actually leads to a whole new different post-COVID way of approaching a marketplace. So are we scratching the immediate itch here, or are we actually pivoting or pirouetting our business into a whole different way of working inside a market? Jack, what's your thoughts first?
Top of mind thoughts are that this should be a limited, hopefully one-off play, and that any meaningful long-term business development should be on the back of an equally long-term strategy with invested partners where you understand the market and there's a win-win on both sides. I think tactical plays are difficult from a pricing and margin perspective, and in the long term may not deliver the returns that you'd like.
Yeah. Alistair, from a different perspective here, from yours, what do you think? Is this a one-off move that you're working with your logistics partners for, or is this the start of something different?
Well, look, just talking from a New Zealand perspective, we're hoping as soon as possible we can get the air freight portion and passenger aircraft flying as quickly as possible. But we just don't think that's going to be in the short term. When will air freight open back up so that you can have access to all markets again at relatively inexpensive prices? Could be 3-6 months, could be longer. So anything tactically now, it's going to cost a hell of a lot more to move anything to a market quickly, 2 or 3 times more than what you might have been paying a month ago. So yeah. Yeah,
you've raised good points. The transfer from back to business as usual actually isn't going to happen for a while. So tech may have to last for a little bit longer. So from your point of view, leading companies who have got multi-year strategies into markets, what's your feeling on this?
I think from Jack's perspective before, tactical is not really going to win you immediate revenue. If you have an urgency burning option to move inventory right now, I think there's 3 options we need to consider. One is around hold it. Can you actually hold it, work with your bank, work with your supply chain to hold that asset until you build your strategy to the right market? Because the cost of opening up a market is substantial. And if you haven't got it right, you're not going to get the product selling through. Second option is triage your existing markets, right? As I spoke about before, work with your current partners and see if there's other opportunities there. And third is around, if you need to urgently move it, try and find some market you can dump it that is not your existing markets. Protect your brand. And a great story is a client 4 or 5 years ago got a shiny opportunity to move a container into China. They then we did some strategy work for them, and Hong Kong was going to be their core #1 market. Then we found the right retailer for their product. That retailer did some due diligence in the market, found out that container had been dumped in China, and they wouldn't deal with it. Right, so all of a sudden, they lost a massive opportunity to be in one of the premium stores in Hong Kong. So protect your brand. I think, from Paul's perspective, Hamish, we see this all the time, right? Look after your brand. It's of lots of value.
Yeah. So from just final words to you, Hamish, on this, given that we don't know how long the tactical selling has to go, so we may actually be in a position, to Alistair's point, that we're trying to move inventory in the easiest possible way for a little while. Is a single platform like Amazon going to be able to meet all your needs inside that space, or should we be looking for wider strategies at the same time to broaden the base of risk?
Look, I mean, it can over time, but I think it's better to have a whole integrated e-commerce approach. If you're looking, B2C going e-commerce, so you've got your own e-commerce site, you're driving traffic there. You've got Amazon that helps build your brand awareness, helps you acquire customers, make sales on there. More and more people are advertising on Amazon, and it's a key way to acquire customers. And we see it's like Amazon and your own e-commerce rise together, like both rising together. And I think also looking back to a question you had earlier around, is this a key change? Like, I'm talking to a lot of manufacturers, and they are moving away from their traditional selling into retailers approach. Like, speaking to one just 2 days ago who said, we're just going to go down to our 12 top retailers, and then we're just going to leave it at that. Like, and I've got hundreds of them, but they're just narrowing that right down because they see their future as an e-commerce play, which is a massive shift from where people have been. But that's just almost like, because some of these are selling into tourist places as well, so that's just gone. And no, it's almost like no choice, but it is actually a really good choice anyway. I think we're going to see a lot of that. People make this pivot, or pirouette into more of an e-commerce, direct to consumer or on a marketplace, and it will be one of the best things that's ever happened to their business in terms of how they can scale and grow far bigger than what they ever could have through the traditional approach that they've been taking.
Yeah. So we guess that you're almost bursting the bubble here that says there is an easy way to do it, but if you persevere with it, then there may actually be greater rewards than we first think. So thank you for that. Why don't we launch a poll just to see what's changed since last week? It is 10:41, and we want to get onto some questions here. Hamish, launch the poll.
Okay, so this poll here is one we're running every week, and it's really just comparing. Now tell me, is this up and running? Because I've found previously.
It's up and running.
It's up and running, great.
Button this week.
So how are you compared to last week? More confident, less confident, the same in terms of recovery in your export markets? So far away. So we've got...
We're tracking this week to week to see what's changing over. So just don't overthink it. Just hit the button that seems to make.
That's right. So we'll come back to those poll results, Andy.
Yeah, but let's jump into some questions. Hamish, have you got something at the top of the feed there?
Yeah, I have. And just before I do that, again, people, if you've got questions, as you've been probably listening and pondering, have a look at the Q&A section down the bottom and put your questions in there, because then we can organise them and not lose them in the feed. So here at the first question we've got here, just what do we got? Has there been chatter in NZ yet to integrate exporter community with the travel and tourism with VR experiential tourism? Interesting one there. I mean, any...
Paul?
That's been passed.
Thank you. Interestingly, at the beginning of this year, we had some conversations with some local body tourism boards just around how to look at customer acquisition offshore. And one of those conversations was the role of technology in terms of introducing people to New Zealand through, likes of VR and AR. I think it's a hot industry, but it's a long way off integration because the cost of entry to that is still really, really high. Once it becomes more commoditized, I think we'll see a lot more of that VR experiential stuff opening up. What we have seen conversely is when it comes to kind of online selling, the role of AR to start to put products into people's environments has become pretty much commonplace with most of the e-com platforms. So, with that in mind, we're seeing it open up to be a lot more accessible, for sure.
Perfect. Thank you, Paul. Does that answer your question? There's a question in here from Bo, and this is one for you, Jack. Here, Bo is asking if you could just, in the top of your mind, summarize the changes which might be escalated in the next 6 to 12 months. So, what are the 3 things we should be looking at as things change in the next 6 to 12 months in terms of?
Oh right, yeah. So if I could speak to that from an FMCG perspective, we've been having a discussion with one of the larger retailers in South Korea, Home Plus, for the last year or so around building a strategic partnership with New Zealand product. And one of the biggest things that's been on their mind, and it's really only been brought to the fore by this current situation, is the move from offline to online. And what they're predicting is that within 2 to 3 years, that was the baseline prediction. The vast majority of consumers will have moved from just tapping on keys for online to moving to using their voice recognition technology in their house, linked in with their television. And the concern is that if they're tapping on keys online, then they have an actual proactive way to get in touch with consumers and to promote. Whereas if they're just using voice recognition technology, how do you attract a new customer and how do you maintain brand loyalty if all people are saying is, can I please have 3 of this product, and then the TV links in? So we're expecting that technology will come to the fore a lot faster than was expected beforehand. We're also expecting that the population percentage that are using online sales will increase rapidly. The older generation has been forced to use online, and they're finding that they're actually adjusting quite well to it. The overall logistics systems in Korea are holding up quite well, so we're expecting that will accelerate. We're expecting that a lot of offline stores will fall over, so the number of offline hypermarket stores will decrease. In the short term, the number of supermarkets and convenience stores will increase, but those will also decrease over time. We're also expecting that online platforms will increase their ability and logistic capability for direct imports and warehousing in general, logistics within country. So I think those would probably be some of the main changes.
They're great points. Thank you, Jack. That's magic, mate. Cheers. Hamish, next question.
Right. Okay, so there was, so Trevor's asked a question there around US logistics and delivery. And I think really Alistair covered that, just saying you've just got to create the expectation that it's going to take longer than to add that week. Can
we just spin that question around maybe to Alistair? Just there's the question here from Trevor is about the last mile being really held up in the US, and plainly you can't speak to that. But given the extra pressure that's going to come on resources in all countries as online comes back online, is this a trend that's going to get worse, or do you think it will plateau out after a while?
It depends on, I guess, how affected a country is with COVID. So the whole supply chain is affected everywhere. So from pickup in New Zealand, how quickly can providers get it unloaded onto an aircraft? You might get bumped off a few days, whereas a month ago everything would go same night. Now it might take 1 or 2 days. When it arrives, say, into the US, if you look at USPS right now, they're in force majeure, so they've got no SLAs, meaning what might have taken 2 days might take I don't want to second guess what it's taking now, 3 or 4, but it wouldn't matter. But it wouldn't matter if you're using postal or courier. It's going to be the same issue where even the integrators are having issues. So if a station goes down because of a COVID incident, then potentially there'll be delays for final mile. So there's just delays in every aspect of the supply chain at the moment.
Yeah. Okay, it's cool. So it's like we need to remain open-minded and flexible on that.
And my point is, keep that communication open, because probably 90% of your complaints are, where's my shipment? I mean, and well, certainly that's what I hear. So, but making sure that you stay in touch with your clients and give them the best information you can of where their shipment is.
And I guess the flip side of that, at the moment like this, then people actually are more forgiving than they would have been pre-COVID anyway. So
yes, one extra point is, and your clients will be more forgiving for paying more for shipping as well. So don't, if you've got, I'll make it up now, say you've said $9.99 for shipping, but you have to put it up to $14.99. Well, that's the new normal now. So shipping's not free.
Yeah, it's a great point. Nice one. Great point. Well made. Thank you, Alistair. We've got an interesting question in here from Heather. Thank you, Heather. Asking if exporters are factoring any changes in destination compliance or quarantine restrictions. What have we seen around there? Is there any changes in that happening?
I did hear, and maybe Alistair, you can clarify this, that even that there needs to be the 14-day window with sea freight. And so if it's going to Australia, it needs to sit in the harbour for 7 days. Is that correct?
I haven't heard. I'm sorry, I haven't heard that, but I can get back to you on that, Hamish. What I have heard, especially in New Zealand, is the government's, allowing all goods in and out of New Zealand without delay. So at least from a New Zealand perspective, our ports are business as usual for ocean.
Yeah.
But I can check on that question.
Okay, great. Lovely. Thanks, Alastair. That's great. Now we've got a question from Maria here, who is asking if there's a simple way to have access to an instant comparison between platforms. Is there anything out there you can go to go if I'm going into that market, platform A versus platform B? Paul, probably a good question for you. Is there? The answer, hopefully yes, but it may well be no.
Yeah, well, I wish there was something. Yes, I mean we do our own comparisons, but they're all everything's specific to the business needs, right? And that's the challenge of it. I guess you'll find lots of blog posts and kind of web articles around relevant platforms, but they always have a skew towards a preference, and cutting through that noise is probably the hardest thing. So I guess I'd look for an obligation-free kind of a recommendation from a partner that specializes in that sort of stuff, whether it's e-commerce or marketplaces or what have you. I guess the other challenge that you face is that there are so many options out there, right? That you can get bogged down by the noise, and you need someone to help you cut through that, right? And that takes context in order to be able to do that.
And that's a great reminder to reach out for recommendations. Putting a shout out to the export community and the wider ecosystem is a good way to cutting through that, even though there's no magic bullet. So yeah, this is like in a time like this, we're all here for each other. So let's remember that.
I think there's never been a better time, right, to reach out and ask. Everyone's there to help each other. So, I'd be surprised if someone's not gonna, want to be involved in that type of conversation with you. Whereas previously, there's probably a price tag that comes with that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that's wicked. Yes, great reminder. Thanks, Paul. Next question, Hamish.
So I'm going to just jump ahead one from John Barley. How many strategies should an exporter run at any one time, and what system should they use to measure the results? So a reasonably big question.
Mitchell, do you want to say that?
Was that giving it to me?
Yeah.
You're right back at you.
I'm just the match official, mate. This is one for Christopher Boys.
Look, I think you have to have your overarching strategy for the business, and then you're going to have an export strategy or channel strategy. And all of those have got different strategies for each market. Every market is different, and we need to be very respectful to each of those markets. And as the question before from Ria was around, is there a global piece of research around all these online channels? Well, no, there's not really, because every market is different, and you have to work it out for your own business, because you have an own brand and an own point of difference and a value proposition that's really critical. So, business strategy, but, great story from the conversation the other day with a client. They are now running monthly strategies and they're having weekly board meetings. This stuff is moving so fast at the moment. You have to have that kind of pace to keep up with it. Otherwise, you're not going to react fast enough, or you're going to make the wrong decision.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. That's brilliant. Actually, Heather's just pinged in with an answer there, just on the quarantine question, saying that from her experience that both Australia and Singapore are allowing NZ shipments in with no quarantine period at the present moment. So thanks for that update, Heather. That's cool. Should we go to the question from Paula on here? Paula's got a question which we actually were talking about a little bit earlier today. In her business, she has a reverse problem. The products are flying out the door from their websites, but it means that their stock levels are running low. The problem is that winter inventory is stuck in transit to New Zealand from their factory, which happens to be in Manila, and it's an air freight product coming in from Manila, and it's been stuck since early March. So what Paula's got is a problem that's just about to hit in a few weeks' time. Alastair, one from you. How do you go about
it's everybody's problem, and what I mean by that is if your freight forwarder can't help you, then you have to call the next one, I guess. And I think we're all talking as an industry, so because we want to make sure that we can get freight in and out of New Zealand and around the world. So I think we touched on it earlier. All the freight forwarders are working together to try and get freight moving. Even looking at co-sharing charter flights, because one freight forwarder doesn't want to have to charter one flight if they can go in a share charter. So we're all trying to get freight moving. Yeah, I mean, the only advice is I guess you just have to call the next forwarder to see if they can help you. But yeah, Manila is in full lockdown, a lot stricter than than New Zealand. However, I do believe there's a flight coming out of Manila, a repatriation flight. You might want to look at the NZTE website under My Freight, and just to see if there's a repatriation flight on Air Philippines or Philippine Airlines. That would be my advice.
Perfect. And what can you give us the address of that website?
Yeah. I'll stick it into the
put it in the chat.
Into the chat. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, that's grand. Well, we're almost time. We've got time for one more question, Hamish.
So we've got on here from Donna saying, do we have any actual stats about what is being exported now as opposed to February and March earlier this year? Like, is there a change in what we're seeing exported out of New Zealand?
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't want to give a bung statistic, but imports are down, massively, almost by half for mail, because and also exports are down because that, as I said, there might have been 10 flights to the US a day just 4 weeks ago. Now there's one every other day. So freight's just down in general for air freight, but ocean freight's still sailing smoothly, so to speak.
Yeah, perfect. So just as we're just about out of time in here, thank you so much for joining us. I just want to go to everybody just to give us, amongst the challenges we've discussed, a reason to be cheerful about the future. Jack, give us a reason to be cheerful.
Overall, consumer demand is holding up very well in Korea, ready for a very strong bounce as soon as this all clears up. So get ready for a strong market when all this clears over.
Nice one. I'm liking that. Paul, reason to be cheerful.
I think this has been a fantastic opportunity to force through new thinking in your business. And, for our business, it's been revolutionary in terms of the way that we've decided to operate. And I think for every business out there, these types of catalytic change are really good for you, right? Because they force you into behavior change. So I think that's a really good thing.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. Christopher?
Well, I think there's a silver lining here. I think the people that are focused on have got a bit of a strategy at play and are reviewing that at the moment are seeing opportunities. Yeah. There's clear opportunities out there. Some of the best brains at the moment are looking at it and going, massive markets there. How do we get there? How do we segment it? How do we get to those, make the revenue?
Perfect, thank you. And Alistair, your last reason to be cheerful.
Yeah, cheerful because we're all working together, as I said, not just as a business. We're closer to our colleagues now. 10, 20 phone calls a day. Projects, instead of taking 6 months, now get done in 6 days.
Yeah.
Everyone's really working hard. Cross-industry support, government support, and when we come out of this, we're all going to be better professionals and people, once it gets back to normal.
Yeah, that's a lovely point. Thank you. Hamish, how's that survey done? How cheerful is our audience compared to last week?
Well, I'll share those results now.
Press the button.
Tell me, is it sharing? Can you see?
That's actually more confidence.
Yeah.
Well, that is
same level of confidence. So, so that's encouraging, and 20% more confident as well. And I think with the lockdown ending, that'll make the operation of businesses a lot easier, than what it has been. So I think that's encouraging, and also just in terms of a point there touching on what a lot of the others were saying. There's this quote from a guy, Joe Vitale, who goes, "Money likes speed. If you drag your feet, ponder, question, delay, or stall, the money goes to the next person in line." And, it's times like this where, while we say slow down to speed up, but it is actually, hearing Chris talk about weekly board meetings rather than monthly or 2 monthly, like there is that cadence that is certainly picked up. And, and it is this moment of change that I think will, for many businesses, be the best thing that's ever happened for the business. So.
Thank you. Thanks for the reasons to be cheerful amongst the planning which we're all doing. I just want to point out before we go that Alice has just put on the chat the URL for that NZTE support around the freight. It's covid19.nzte.govt /myfreight, or just Google that and you will find it. We're going to be back next week with another topic on more tactical responses here, but it's here actually about the benefits and the pitfalls of trying to triage what's left of the export plans that you had before. So we'll look out for that. The invitations coming into your inbox in the next few days. But for the present moment, a huge thank you to Jack and to Paul, to Alistair, to Christopher, and from Hamish and from myself. Be safe out there, and hopefully we'll see you back here, same place, same time next week. Take care of yourselves. See you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Thank you. Good stuff.